Hi, I'm Charlotte and thank you for stopping by on my channel. Today's video is the first of a two-part video that I wanted to make on critically and also commercially acclaimed novels written in French, which I haven't heard a lot about on English-speaking BookTube, but I think you should definitely check out if you like literary fiction. It is a two-part because I started thinking about some of these titles, and then I realized there were a lot of them, and I decided then to split my choices between modern literary fiction, which is today's selection, and then classics, which I will put out in a few weeks. I think there are a lot of novels written in French that are already read by English-speaking readers, especially in BookTube. And there are names that keep coming back, and I think it's great that people read them. I'm thinking about Leila Slimani, I'm thinking about David Diop, I'm thinking about Anne Ernaux, I'm thinking about Maëlys de Kerangal. But there are also a lot of other French authors, contemporary or kind of modern French authors, which aren't read, or at least aren't really talked about on BookTube. All of those are well-known books that were published in recent years. Those are not confidential choices. So if you're a French-speaking reader, you've probably heard of all those books and you've probably read, actually, most of them. And I think that's also a reason why I want to talk about them, is because it's not only my opinion that those are great books, it's a commonly acknowledged opinion among the French-speaking reading world. Oh, and also all of those books have been translated to English, so translations exist and are freely available. And I think for each book, I'm going to put in the description then below links on where you can find more information about the books and possibly buy them or get information on them for your library if you're interested in reading them. And the way I decided to structure it is I will, for each book, tell you why I would recommend it to you, and also talk about a book written in English and relatively recent or well-known that I think shares some commonalities with the French book I picked. Okay, so let's start. The first book I picked, I don't actually have because I just lent it to my father who came to visit and didn't have a book and needed something to read. It is called Black Sugar, and it was written by Miguel Bonnefoy. It's a very small book, published, I believe, in 2016 or 2017. Miguel Bonnefoy is a young author. I think currently he's 36 years old. He is of Venezuelan and Chilean heritage, but he grew up going to French schools. And so he developed a style that is very academic, but I think in the best possible sense of the term. When I read this book, I believe it was written by someone older, by someone in their 80s, maybe because of the very classical style. And I think it is a book that also could have been written maybe 100 or 150 years ago. It has a kind of academic, almost purist quality, but it is very easy to read, and it's beautiful language that you would study in university or in a literature class. Black Sugar is a book that I would recommend to you if you like sweeping family sagas written in Baroque and luscious style, but it is also under 200 pages long. It tells the story of, well, it starts off with a legend in which the pirate Henry Morgan would have left a treasure somewhere in Venezuela. And then it talks about a family owning a rum plantation set on the ground where the treasure is said to have been lost. And because of this, the place is visited by people looking for treasure over the years. And in particular, it follows the life of Serena Otero, who we follow first as a little girl and then as she grows into adulthood. One book that Black Sugar made me think about when I read it is A Mercy by Toni Morrison. Now, I'm not saying that Miguel Bonfoy is reaching the genius of Toni Morrison. What I'm talking about here is that, like I think A Mercy, Black Sugar is a historical fiction, but it feels like reading a fable. And at the same time, it encompasses a lot of universal topics. In the case of Black Sugar, those topics are family, inheritance, greed, and the effect that ambition has on your life. Those are some of the topics I saw. And it is a book that packs lots of themes and a huge amount of content in a very small size. So this is why Black Sugar made me think of A Mercy by Toni Morrison. And I think that if you want to discover an exciting and at the same time almost outside of time new voice of French literature, and also, with minimal engagement, because it's 200 pages, then you should really try Black Sugar by Miguel Bonfoy. My next pick is it's a much more mainstream title, actually. It's a book that won the French Goncourt Prize, which is the equivalent of the Booker Prize of the Pulitzer in French language. And it is written by an author who is read in English, which I have heard English BookTuber talk about for his crime novels. That book is Au revoir là-haut in French. In English, it's called The Great Swindle, and it was written by Pierre Lemaitre. This book was also adapted into a movie by Albert Dupontel, which won several César, which are the French equivalents of Oscars. So it's a book and a story which had been broadly displayed and acclaimed in the French-speaking world. I would recommend that you read The Great Swindle if you like intricate stories, especially when it comes to the little ones beating the system. If you like social commentary, especially on classes, packed in a lot of irony. And also if you're interested in World War I, because this story is centered, is set just after World War I. The plot, very summarized, it is the story of two men who are very different from each other. One is a man who worked at a middle position in government functions, and the other one is the son of a very rich family, who were both left physically and mentally hurt by World War I, and who realized that they will never receive reparations from the state for what they gave up for their country. And then they decide to work on a con in order to make money out of the corrupt system. It is very plotty. You want to know what is going to happen, but it also features this wonderful friendship between those two men, which is at the heart of the story. It is based on true event, and it has a tragic quality to it. It seems like everything is running toward an ending that will have to be tragic in some way. It's quite long. It's quite a big book. But because of the style, because of the plot, because of these characters that you just want to keep going along with, I think it gets read very easily. A book written in English, which I think takes some themes that are related to The Great Swindle, is A Net for Small Fishes by Lucy Jago, which I just read this month. This is a historical novel, which is set a long time before that, in the 16th century, but it also features at its center two characters, those are two female characters, who are quite different, but ally with each other, I'm not sure how you say it, in order to beat a system which forces them down. And it also features, I didn't speak about it for The Great Swindle, but it's definitely a plus point, I think, of both of those novels, a relatively contemporary, modern style of writing, which doesn't clash with the story, but helps a contemporary reader to get engaged in the characters and in the plot. Now, the third book I selected, it's a bit of an older book, but it is a book which I love, and it's a story that was recommended to me by my mother. It's one of her favorite novels of all time. I read it in my early 20s, maybe in my late teens, and it was a bestseller when it came out in the early 1990s, and then was adapted in a movie in the 2000s, which was also a huge success. The book is called in French, Un long dimanche de fiançailles. The author is Sébastien Japrisot, and in English it translates to A Very Long Engagement, which is also the name of the movie. Maybe you're familiar with the movie because it was made by Jean-Pierre Jeunet, who is also the director of Amélie, and Audrey Tautou, who played Amélie in the movie with the same name, plays the protagonist of A Very Long Engagement in the movie version. And the movie, I really like the movie. The movie is really nice, but it is quite different from the book. And I think that the book is kind of a must-read if you like historical novels with very engaging characters and a plot that you cannot just not escape from. It's thrilling. Now the plot, shortly, because I told you it was thrilling, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. It's about two young people called Mathilde and Manek who grew up together. And then during World War I, Manek is sent to war as a very, very young man. And at some point, he gets trialed during the war as a deserter. And Mathilde receives information from the government that he has been executed, that he's dead. But she does not believe it. Her intuition tells her this is not true. So after the war, she sets off to try and find out what really happened to him. And in order to find out, she meets a number of people who knew Manek during the war, including 4 other prisoners who were convicted and executed at the same time as him. And through this, you discover the effects of World War I on the French population, as well as individual stories of a number of people from different backgrounds. And you keep following the plot to find out what happened to Manek at the same time as Mathilde. It's a masterful story, written in also quite a classical style, but almost you feel the narrator's voice. The narrator is with you. The narrator is not Mathilde. It is someone who is following us with Mathilde and accompanying us for the trip. When I think back about it, this novel makes me think about novels by Kate Atkinson. The reason why they do it, I picked Transcription because Transcription is kind of a thriller, is that I think that in Kate Atkinson's novels, and it's one of the reasons why I think she's one of my favorite authors, you do have character development and you follow the characters and you get in their thoughts and they have an introspective part, but they also have great plots that just make you want to keep reading. I find those very entertaining, usually. And for me, Sébastien Japrisot achieved the same effect with his narration. It's not exactly the same style. Those are distinct voices, but they share this masterful management of plot, together with great character descriptions that make you want to go on. The fourth book I chose is Petit Pays by Gaël Faye. This book was also shortlisted for the Goncourt. Didn't say it. In English, this book is called Small Country, direct translation. As I said, this book was also was shortlisted for the Goncourt, and it won the Goncourt des lycéens, which is a prize that goes together with the Goncourt. As is basically, the way it works is that high schoolers read the Goncourt shortlist and then give out a prize to their favorite book. And it is a prize which I really like to know about, because usually, so those are all modern literary fiction of, critically assessed literary merit, but they also usually they're not maybe the most experimental, barrier-breaking books. They usually are maybe a little easier to go through, a little more plot or character-oriented. And I think that they make usually for very nice reads. I read several of them. Some of the recent Goncourt des lycéens, which I'm pretty sure you have heard of if you read literature translated from French, are Based on a True Story by Delphine de Vigan, Charlotte by David Funkinos, and At Night All Blood is Black by David Diop. So usually solid choices. Now, Small Country, I would recommend to you if you're interested in reading a child's perspective on political unrest. If you like stories on mixed heritage and immigration, and if you like simple but deliberate literary style. Gaël Faye is, his father is from Belgium, his mother is from Burundi, and he grew up in Burundi before going back to Belgium when the war in Burundi started in the 1990s. And this book is not an autobiography, but it is the story of a young boy who has a mother from Burundi and a father from Belgium, and who is forced to leave the country with his family when the war starts in Burundi. So it's based on things that he knows. The style, maybe I should talk about the style, because something to know about Gaël Faye is that he's not only a writer, he's also a songwriter and an artist. Mostly, I'd say his style is rap. I'm not an expert on music, but that's the general umbrella it falls under. And I like to listen to his music because the texts are very interesting. And especially the first album, Pili Pili sur un croissant au beurre, it takes over some similar topics as Small Country. And there is actually a song called Small Country. I think I will put a link to a YouTube playlist of his album, so you can listen to it if you're interested. And I think the fact that he's someone who's used to writing short, percussive texts on certain topics is reflected in the way that he writes his fiction. It's a very simple style, but it is very efficient and it feels very deliberate. One thing that I liked, but might not be liked by everyone, is the fact that because the protagonist is a child in this book, it's a lot of show, not tell. You see what he sees, and then as an adult reader, with more knowledge than this child, you're led to draw your own conclusions on what is happening. I think it's very powerful. I think it helps you make some work in your head which engages you emotionally with the story. And it was, in some parts, it was absolutely heartbreaking. I cried in this book. I don't cry a lot, but there is a scene in this book that just made me cry. Because it's heartbreaking. I mean, it's a story of war and of people caught in the war. Children, but not only children, civilians, people who never asked for any of it and who who see their lives completely changed by what is happening. And I think it's quite a masterful book. And it was his first novel, and it was recognized by critics and by audience as being some kind of a tour de force. It's a great book. One book which I think could be compared to this book is actually not a novel, it's a graphic novel, and it was not written in English, it was written in French, so what I said before is not true, but I'm still going to pick this one as a comparison. It's Persepolis by Marjane Satrapi. In Persepolis, you also have this child's view of complicated political situations, as well as a storyline on immigration and cultural clash. And because it is a graphic novel, it is a show not tell situation where you look at the pictures and then you make up your mind as an adult about what is happening. And I think if you read and like Persepolis, you might want to give a try to Petit Pays. Now my last pick is Vernon Subutex by Virginie Despentes. This one is the first of a trilogy. They all call Vernon Subutex, Tom 1, Tom 2, Tom 3. And it is some kind of it was a cultural event in the French-speaking world when it came out. Virginie Despentes is a quite well-known author. She has been writing provocative novels since the 1990s. She's someone who had a complicated life. Among other things, she was raped very young, and then she had to do lots of different jobs to survive, which included sex work, which she practiced voluntarily, but it definitely had an impact. It definitely had an impact on the novels she wrote afterwards. And she also frequented the punk scene in the 1990s in France. And I think that this book is kind of a quintessential product, maybe, of her past. Vernon Subutex talks about a man, Vernon, who used to sell CDs. He had a CD store and vinyls, and then when those stopped being broadly used, he had to sell his store, and he slowly went into poverty, which led him to lose everything he had, including his house and his place to live, all of his money. And in the beginning of the novel, a good friend of his, who was a successful singer, dies and leaves him a recording that is considered to be very precious. And then, as he hops from house to house, from acquaintances because he is homeless, people start looking for the recording and for him. And what you get out of this book is a kind of patchwork of voices and stories from the people around Vernon, who work, for many of them, in the entertainment, art industry and music industry. And it is both kind of tough and provocative, and sometimes very, I don't know if I should use the word vulgar, but it's very crude, maybe, very rough, and also naturalistic. And it explores many different people. It encompasses a number of different sexual identities, and it speaks about sexuality and classes and art and music. And it has a kind of naturalistic fresco feeling, especially in this first volume. The 3 volumes are quite different. I think this one is my favorite. The second one is a bit lighter. This one is quite dark. And then the third one gets super dark. The third one has one scene that it scarred me for life, like, honestly. And I think they are worth reading, all 3 of them. But this one, I would say, is kind of a must read if you are interested in contemporary French literature. Virginie Despentes is someone who has a rich experience and is someone who has made a lot of thought about especially sexuality, sexual identity, and gender identity as well. And she has a style that is a bit tough and that is rough and that uses lots of slang and sometimes feels a bit crass. But when you look at what she's talking about, it's, I think, extremely incisive, and it's very perspicacious, and it is just, I think, some of the most original that you can get out of contemporary French literature. I would absolutely recommend you try it if you think you can manage it, because it has violence in it, both physical and sexual violence. And it also puts you into the head of characters who are not likable, to say the least. It feels like a gut punch, but it's also very funny. And yeah, as I said, I think it's kind of a must-read for contemporary French literature readers. One book that I read after I read Vernon Subutex, and the whole time I was reading it, I thought, oh, this feels to me like the first Vernon Subutex, is Girl, Woman, Other by Bernardine Evaristo. The reason why it makes me think of it is because of how it focuses of a microcosm by looking at the stories of many different characters and kind of painting a picture of modern society. And also in the way that it explores gender and sexual identities and covers a lot of contemporary themes, almost in filigrane behind the interesting and gripping stories of the people living in our world. The whole time I was reading Bernardine Evaristo, I couldn't take out Vernon Subutex of my head. Very different styles, I think, but both somehow visionary and utterly original in the current literary landscape. All right, so that was it for today. As I said, I'm going to come back soon with a classics version of this video. I hope this was somehow interesting for you. I'm looking forward to see you again on this channel, and goodbye.